Hello and welcome to NFT Guild Roundtable number 11. We had a little delay last week and we had some people sick with family issues, had to delay a week, but we're happy to have some awesome people in the room today. We got Sebastian Bode from IOG here with us, and some more people joining as we speak. I'll let them in. Yeah, welcome to NFT Guild Roundtable 11. Thank you for watching. And Sebastian, Sebastian from Cardano Foundation, my bad. Sir.
No worries.
Apologies. Thank you for being here. I can hand it off to you or Philip. Philip, let's let Philip do his little update and then let you get into your presentation, Mr. Bode. Philip.
Yeah, thank you, Philip. Thank you, Peter. And thank you, Sebastian, for being patient. I just wanted to update quickly. We are currently in process of writing out two CIPs. First CIP is to expand the royalty standard, to expand CIP 27. We will try to send an email to transfer authorship of the CIP 27 to the NFT Guild. If that hopefully passes, we'll expand the CIP, try to get the community to back it up. And the second CIP is we are doing is the NFT verification without the IDs. Basically, Patrick is writing out 66, which is with the IDs. We're doing another standard without the IDs. We're still working out the details, so maybe next time we will have a presentation on how we plan to do that.
Sweet, thank you, Philip. Yeah, next on the 23rd, we have a scheduled event with Remaker, RMKR, with the Polkadot ecosystem. Anyway, Sebastian, handing it off to you, sir. Apologies for that slip of the lips on my
end. I feel honored you consider me as someone from IOG. Oh, Mel is around. I'm not allowed to say this. So let me first of all try to share my screen because I prepared some slides. Hope it works. Do you see my screen?
I see it. Right. All good. Thank you.
That's good. All right. So today I'm going to walk you through our activities that we did during that summer together with University of Zurich. And they were all around the topic of leveraging Cardano for issuing certificates or badges to learners. So just to give you some background, every year there is a so-called summer school held at University of Zurich, and they do a deep dive on blockchain technology. And during the last couple of years, we got involved there and we're providing the students with education about how Cardano works, what are the specifics compared to other blockchains, what are the strengths. Of course, there are only strengths. And then we are doing usually with those guys together some projects. And in the last year, so 2021, the first time what we did is to mint a plain NFT according to CIP 25 metadata standard, and issued those NFTs to the participants, just to give them some kind of reward for having participated successfully in the summer school. And during this year, we wanted to experiment with just other metadata formats, just because giving them a visual representation like a badge, which is representing their successful participation in that summer school, isn't just enough. And we wanted to figure out if there are any other data formats available, which are a bit more data rich when it comes to the representation of the actual contents of the course the students participated in. Oh my God, let me figure out. Okay, there we go. So just as a general heads up on what Cardano Foundation is aiming for, mostly when we're talking about metadata specific features on Cardano or actually on any other blockchain also. There is the topic of data interoperability, which is super important if you want to achieve big adoption of the system that you're building. So this is probably true for almost any IT system out there. So it helps if the data formats that you are able to export or that you're able to import in your system are compatible with other ecosystems also. That's usually why tools like Office tools have a couple of export functionalities, as well as all the different IT tools out there. But there are different degrees to what kind of data format and how open data actually a data format can be considered. And there's like a nice categorization which the W3C put together when it comes to different like quality levels of open data format. And it starts from opaque data formats like PDF, which is like a binary, a byte soup, representing just some content, very proprietary, so no open data format. Then going over structured data formats, like probably XLS, so like the Microsoft Office spreadsheet formats are, which is kind of XML data, but still with a lot of proprietary contents in there. Going over to completely independently interpretable data formats like ZSV, and then in the last two stages, it's about a concept that's super old, actually, more than 20 years now, 18 years, I don't know, which is related to the good old semantic web. And those are all the RDF, JSON, LD, so linked data formats, basically, which would allow you to express the semantics of a certain content that is expressed by one data format by applying to a generalized schema. So we were taking this into consideration. We were taking a look in the ecosystem that is available when it comes to, or different standards that are available when it comes to representation of educational certificates. And there is one data format that directly pops into mind, or when you start Googling for it, and it's the so-called OpenBadges standard. The OpenBadges standard is actually, it's almost like NFT metadata because it links metadata and image data to each other, and it is especially targeted towards granting people with badges for any educational certificates that you can receive in courses. Good thing is about this started, the definition effort started back in 2011. During that time, being mostly driven by the Mozilla Foundation, but they grew. And almost 2016, Mozilla gave up their activities with regards to this data standard and moved it into a more open source, open data related consortium, which is the so-called IMS Global Learning Consortium. And they are at the moment responsible for defining all the standards, aligning with the different stakeholders, evolving the standard. So at the moment, the latest version of the standard available is version 2. And currently there are ongoing definition activities in the working groups from IMS Global to define a version 3. And this version 3 will be compatible with W3C DIDs and verifiable credentials. You can see later on, there's one slide where it's pretty obvious that the whole OpenBadges system mimics pretty well the typical SSI/DID contents. The OpenBadges standard is actually, just from a technical point of view, it's a schema for JSON data that accords to the JSON linked data format. It defines a couple of entities representing universities or educational entities that are able to grant certificates to students. Of course, it is able to represent the certificate holders, like the students, and then it also is able to represent like the courses itself, so that you can create for each course in your curriculum an entry. what we did then with regards to the UZH summer school is that we registered. So we were leveraging CIP10, which is like a registry of different metadata labels and a mapping towards the data specifications. And we just leveraged CIP10 and registered a new metadata label. It's 1870, so this number relates to the year of birth of an famous educator, female educator from the 19th century, actually. That's why we chose this number, just as a side note. And what we pretty much did is, so CIP10 is super straightforward. You just file a PR, so pull request on the GitHub repository. You state what your intention is with that metadata label, and then you link also a schema to the data format so that it's obvious what kind of data gets represented when that metadata label is used. I mean, on the ledger level, this does not prevent, of course, anyone else from using that metadata label for even other metadata, but it's more like a good practice, or like a best practice. You can approach a topic like that. So I already talked you through the different types of entities that can get represented. Let me see if this works. When you are now wanting to mint those, yeah, exactly. That's Mrs. or Miss Montessori. That's the date of birth of her. So there are 3 entities that are represented in this metadata standard, and all are minted as metadata transactions, or transactions that contain metadata. One for the issuer, which is like the person responsible for the university, or representing the university itself. One for the badge class, which represents the course, and then one for the assertion, which is kind of the verifiable credential, or the credential that is granted to one of the students that participated in a certain course. Here's an overview over the scheme, and that's actually what I was talking about when it comes to the relationship to SSI systems, because you pretty much have a so-called issuer, which is the one issuing the credential, or in our terms, the badge that grants you, or that kind of qualifies you that you have successfully participated in one course. And then you can use that metadata, which we now rooted on chain, on Cardano blockchain, with a transaction metadata, with a transaction that contains that specific metadata, so that anyone can actually verify this kind of data. So how does CIP10, I don't know how familiar you are with CIP10, but I mean, in the end, it's just like a JSON file that contains a list of metadata labels and then a short description. As you can see here, that is our metadata label, and then it's a very brief description. The actual details of how that data format look like are described in the pull requests, and the pull requests are reviewed, for example, by people that are involved in the CIP process. They check it for sanity, if it makes sense at all, if there's some adoption that is foreseen for this kind of data. So just to justify if it makes sense to really register that data, and not that registry gets polluted with probably useless data. Kind of a centralized approach, prone to censorship, of course, but the reviews at all are done by the community and the people involved in the CIP processes. So when you're using Explorer like CExplorer, which I like amongst all the other explorers, of course, in the Cardano ecosystem, but they have that nice feature that you can look up the metadata based on the metadata label. And as you can see, there are a couple of transactions that happened that are related to especially this metadata label, 1817. And when we're starting from the beginning, so the first metadata transaction, we can take a look into that data. And it's a pretty straightforward presentation of that. You got an ID, which links to a JSON file that is hosted on the website of the university. You could also link it to an IPFS hosted file. That would make sense for the OpenBadges 2.0 standard. It's not really supported by other clients, but this will be regarded with OpenBadges 3.0. You link, of course, you can add an URL that links to the website of the university that is granting that certificate. You register, you state that this is an issuer, so that it's not a credential or an actual course that is represented by that metadata, so that you can further distinguish when you're consuming the data, what kind of content is here. This is one of the concerns that we have at the moment, because actually when you're regarding things like GDPR, it is difficult, or from a legislation point of view, it's almost impossible to put those PII related data on the chain, because you cannot afford any deletion requests. As we all know, we cannot just delete transactions on mainnet or on any other of the public networks. So this is one of the, it's not a learning, because that was obvious from the beginning, but just for testing that metadata standard, we went the straightforward approach to put this data in here. But one of the improvements would be to probably not directly leverage this kind of metadata and put it on the chain and metadata transactions, but put it on an exactly, or put it on a layer 2 solution, and then just route the proofs that the data has, or that the commitment has really been made on that layer 2 on layer 1. Or you can obfuscate this data and just put a hash of this of the email and the issuer name, so all PII related data in that metadata asset, and then provide kind of an off-chain registry where you have the mapping of those kind of hashes towards this PII related data, so that you're in any time or in any case able to delete it. Right, there's an alternative, or not really, it's an alternative approach driven by some American universities, which we were just able to figure it out during last week, because we were talking to the guys from Flurry. So Flurry is another layer 2 data storage layer that uses, unfortunately, not at the moment Ouroboros as a consensus layer, but another one. But this kind of layer 2 solutions could be used, and some universities in the States use it in the so-called trusted learner network, to publish data that is almost equal to the OpenBadges we point to metadata that we were using. So this could also be an approach, or as soon as there is a proper solution on Cardano available, we could leverage one of those kind of layer 2 solutions out there, just as an outline. I mean, I put together a couple of more slides to go into the details of how the data looks like. That's the one you already saw with the description and the issuer data, which is kind of PII relevant. Not kind of, it's PII relevant. Then the badge class, which identifies the course. In that case, it's the UZH summer school. Deep dive into blockchain class. And then there's the thing that brings both together, so the learner and the actual course, and that's held in the assertion metadata. So for each student, what we did is we minted an NFT based on the CIP25 metadata. So included that 721 metadata label with the NFT representation, so to have a graphical representation of the badge as well. And then the same time, that's a strength of Cardano actually, is we added also that 1870 metadata label in it, and therefore enriched the data so that it's not only a nice picture that you get with your NFT, but also that trustworthy data that anyone else could use to verify that you really participated in that certain course, and that the University of Zurich was the issuer of it. That's it pretty much. So I put another of a few more links in here. Happy to share them afterwards, but that's actually the end of the presentation for now. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Sebastian. I just wanted to throw in here, anyone who has any questions, please hop in and you can do so and give yourself a brief introduction as well when you begin asking the question. Thank you, Sebastian. It's cool. I like the 1870 reference to Maria. All right, Jeremy.
Thank you, and thank you, Sebastian. So I'm Jeremy Furster with the Cardano Foundation, and I'm on the partnerships team. So a couple points to kind of go into deeper is that when we look at this type of enterprise application, the data storage method is normally chosen by the third party themselves. So while you could use IPFS, the University of Zurich, their limitations was that they had to use their own web servers for data storage. But what they have in common is that it's an openly accessible link for that storage type. So whether we talk about Airweave, IPFS, Iagon, which would be decentralized storage solutions, or things like UZH, or looking at, Amazon or Google Cloud, it's just all about bringing access to that data and where it's rooted in. So can we link that data to the issuer is what's pretty important there. It was also nice to see the assertion transaction, because what that shows, which I think is really nice and kind of the advantage of Cardano with our data storage capacity as a layer 1, is that we have two different sections. So we have the 721, and that's followed by the 1870. But as the link showed in the description for this meeting, and maybe Sebastian, that's something I would like to ask you about, is, pool.pm won't show the 1870 data, but they will show the 721 data. So, question one is like, well, why does pool.pm not show the full metadata? And how do we get to that level of interoperability within the ecosystem where, wallets and other explorers do show this metadata label?
Thanks, Jeremy. Is this did you mean pool.pm or Cardano scan?
Pool.pm.
Okay.
So I just posted it here in the chat, a link to one of the assets.
You still see my screen, right?
Yeah,
okay.
I see it. Yeah.
Jeremy, this was a question towards me, you mean?
Yeah. So, yeah, question towards you to answer.
Yeah, so, I mean, when it comes to adoption of those kind of metadata standards, it requires effort on the client side. This definitely means that pool.pm or an explorer like CExplorer, if they want to provide a domain-specific presentation of this kind of data, that's something they have to simply implement on their side. So if they don't just want to display the plain JSON like CExplorer does it on my screen, this would require them to extend their front end. The same is true for pool.pm. What could be the case is that there's kind of a generalized library available, which implements for all those metadata standards a kind of standard visualization when it comes to those kind of things. But this would be quite a challenge to be good looking on the one hand, meaning not too generic, and on the other hand being interoperable with all the different platforms, so browsers, mobile devices, whatever. But it could be a good start. Then the other aspect would of course be that it would be good if those metadata standards are based on JSON LD and would link to public schema registries that automatically provide you with the semantics, so exactly with what kind of content and data content does this relate to that is represented by that certain metadata label. But I think there's no really cheap or even a way without any cost to have a domain specific representation of each metadata label that's attached to it. But a library could be a good way to implement it. Could even, I mean, it should be an open source library, and then people could implement their plugins for the different metadata standards in there if they want to provide a visualization. But this will only work. I'm kind of playing a guessing game. This would only work probably if then that library has a wide adoption, because otherwise there wouldn't be any need or any business value for the people that are doing the implementation. Obvious, I guess.
Jeremy, you have another question, or you done?
Well, just to kind of add to that, right? So
Okay.
I posted in the chat here that and just Sebastian for your screen that you're still sharing it.
I know.
Yeah, okay. So when you do have a pull request that we send to pull.pm because we want to show specifically on their client, like here is the assertion information. But the reason why we went down this approach, instead of to say, well, let's just create an entirely new standard, is because of that interaction link that, you know, is required for creating metadata records on chain and then having that be expressed by wallets and explorers. So we knew that the 721 aspect would be instant and it'd be visual, and that would be nice for people to see. But you know, the added extra benefit would be have both the 721 data, which is surrounding the NFT, and then the assertion and open badge data. So that's it from my side.
Sweet. Philip, you got a question, man? Or statement?
Yeah, thank you, Sebastian, for the presentation. Looks great. My girlfriend is a Montessori teacher, so I appreciate the Montessori, shout out. So from what I understand, okay, you want to have this as a standard, you want to have this as a CIP. Is this something that you are going through, or did you just want to present to us to kind of get the feedback about it, or?
We just intended to present you what we did with the University of Zurich, so that you get an idea what Cardano Foundation, for example, amongst other things, is doing. And we're not going to so actually I'm not aware of any activities that we're going to create a CIP that's related to especially this kind of method to mint a certain special type of NFT that includes that metadata. The CIP work is done just by registering or leveraging CIP 10 and registering the metadata format. So there is no need.
You can theoretically register the 1870 token as a subset of 721 as a CIP, and we can have a guideline for the credentials in general. We can even connect them to the DIDs. If we one day have a DID standard, okay, we would need to analyze a bit deeper for different use cases, but yeah. I think it would be a good step forward, as the work is already done, significant work is already done. Why not propose it, Yeah,
what I would propose is actually that we do some research on version 3 of the method of this OpenBadges standard, because it fits better into the SSI DID activities that are ongoing. Sorry for
okay, cool. I saw someone wrote that you guys are hiring for the SSI specialist, so I'm gonna take a wild guess that this is gonna be a focus for you for some time now.
It is, yeah.
Okay, good to hear.
Mr. Nils. You're on mute, man.
Hey everybody, this is Niels with Hazelnet. Sebastian, thanks for the presentation. Hey Jeremy, hey Peter, hey all the rest. I have a couple of questions. I think the first one that I have is more like general, based on how does an organization kind of keep track of their own certificates? Would they have to use a tool that kind of sifts through the metadata of all the certificates? For example, I looked at the transactions for some of those assertions and the issuer, and some of these are on different policy IDs, and some of them are locked, some of them are open. Are you looking to use the policies for anything, or is it really much more based on just doing a search on the blockchain for specific metadata IDs, because you have those identifiers that kind of say, this is the University of Zurich, that is this issuer.
So when it comes to the currently minted tokens that you find on the blockchain, this was a research project / a project done with the students. So that's probably the reason why it's the minting policies are not perfectly configured, can put it that way. But we would expect that this standard gets integrated in like a professional service offering, like one of the minting services that are available, or by one of the services. Like there are a couple of services from Pearson Education, for example, that you can use as a backend also to issue those kind of certificates to your students, and they would do the integration, and then they would provide also management capabilities on your certificates out there. And this could, just technically speaking, this could be kept track of by just running a chain indexer, looking for that metadata label, and then making a schema check if this really accords to the metadata that's intended to be behind that metadata label.
Gotcha. Which kind of leads me into my second question, which I think you kind of answered already, and that is like, have you during that research project already thought about tooling? It sounds like you have, because I wanted to know, like, how hard will it be for somebody who wants to issue certificates? Because if they have to have a fairly high barrier of entrance, then obviously adoption will be a little bit less likely than if you can just like register somewhere and get it as a service. But it does sound like you guys didn't build any necessarily tooling around it, but just looked at the standards themselves and how they can be best leveraged.
True, yeah. So we didn't build a complete tool suite around this to make it super easy to mint those kind of tokens, because the focus was really just on like checking out if it's possible to do the thing like that, and if the metadata standard that we picked works together with the capabilities of the Cardano blockchain. And then probably in the second step, we are doing more in-depth research on this, what kind of tooling makes sense, and even what is required by the universities. So do more market research, for example, hook up with the guys from the Trusted Learner Network and compare their solution to what we did.
Gotcha. I have one more, but I'll let Mel go first. I don't want to blast you.
Thanks very much. Pleasure to meet everybody. I think some new faces for me. I'm delighted to see you. Sebastian, so I'm also from the Cardano Foundation. One of the nice things about OpenBadges is that you can take that reference metadata and put it in your LinkedIn profile, or put it on some academic website, or put it on something else. And usually the way it works is that it'll reference an image that will show up as a certificate, and then you can pull the metadata and you can verify signatures and the like. One of the problems I kind of see with doing this on blockchain is that if you put that image on Arweave or IPFS, it makes it difficult for other parties then to start pulling that data. How do you think we bridge that gap?
I mean, I would run an indexer and then cache that data and serve it out, maybe as a professional service offering. Yeah. That would be a more straightforward approach. If you're asking me as the tech guy.
Of course, I'm asking you as the tech guy.
Or free service offering. I'm always talking about professional service offering, but I guess that people like universities or institutions like universities, or I don't know, even other companies would like to have some kind of SLA in place when it comes to querying that data.
Do you think
So-
there's an advantage of not using Arweave or IPFS in this sort of context for the adoption of OpenBadges and their use on blockchain?
I didn't get the first part of your sentence, Mel, sorry.
I said, do you think there's an advantage for the sake of adoption of OpenBadges on Cardano for people to reference images on their own websites instead of using Arweave or IPFS, the usual sort of NFT style?
I mean, it's
I'd say
yes,
there
Neil,
is a
please.
solution for there is a solution for there, and I've been having that same problem because I started out using just IPFS because that's what all the projects were using. But then, you know, over time I got more and more people saying, hey, we're using Arweave, can you add that? And like, I can, but I have to spend the time. And actually Smaug from PoolPM and Rocky also from PoolPM, they're working on a solution right now that you may have heard of called NFT CDN IO, which by the name says NFT CDN, but it is actually I think an extensible content delivery network that kind of abstracts away all the knowledge you have to have about any persistence layers for your data. So those tools could be just a proxy for normal like images that are referenced anywhere on the web or normal files. Right now, they're kind of interpreting on-chain NFTs as well as you know, Arweave and IPFS, and they just provide you with one URL that's based on the asset ID, the asset fingerprint. So I could definitely imagine that as we kind of explore those avenues, hey, I want a simple way as an end user, as a consumer, or a company to display those and share those. I think we want to start using service providers. And I think they are a good candidate. They're very open to hearing like what does the industry need. And so if we could just say, hey, this is the badges standard, they do all the analysis, kind of what is in the metadata and how do we display this best. And if we provide them with the tooling, then they can build solutions that kind of are open source, but let us display arbitrary data and not just you know, PNGs that live in IPFS.
I've got a question. So I'm super interested in education in general. You guys are technical. I'm a little more socials. I don't know. A little less technical, let's put it that way, building community, etc. I'm interested in, I pay attention to the DApps and integrations challenge and Catalyst. I know of at least 3 education marketplaces that were funded in Fund 9. And I'm curious if there's like how projects like this, like these can interface with is this just an opportunity for them to adopt a similar standard? Is there efforts from the CF to kind of hold hands and look for projects like these to help bring them to use similar standardization? What do you have any info on that? What's up?
It's a partnerships question, right, Jeremy?
Yeah, it would
Yeah.
be more partnerships. Yes, sir.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I think one of the things that we value a lot at the foundation is to show and demonstrate what can be done with Cardano layer 1 storage solutions. And it also involves different standards and we do want to promote these type of standards to be created on Cardano and see how other third parties then can then interact and take it to a level higher. So I know like Snaprilia is working on the OpenBadge version 3 standard right now. So we did kind of communicate with them like what we did with version 2. And we're happy to see and support those type of projects as far as we can. Like as Cardano grows in popularity, so does the network of universities. And universities are always looking for more speakers and more projects to learn from. So I guess I would say, we all learn from each other in one way or another, right? So there's not any particular person that's driving the conversation forward. But if we can be of help, I'm definitely, open to meeting one of those teams. When you have over 1,000 projects in Catalyst, it might take a little bit of time, but if they can come here, that would make things faster.
Is there like a portal or direct contact that Cardano Foundation has established for these efforts, or is it just find Jeremy?
It's find Jeremy or email like partnerships@cardanofoundation.org. We think about this a lot on what we can do, and a lot of the times, we can't work on several things because as a foundation, we're a bit smaller than others. So we try to be more pointed to what has that network effect. And doing things like this, where thousands of companies are using OpenBadges, definitely has a large network effect. So, if there are other major metadata standards out there that people see and that it already has like a large user base, that is something that's quite interesting for us, because it's all about just the feasibility of how do we bring that to Cardano. And, is it initiation or is it a next level discussion? We can help to figure that conversation out.
Thank you, Jeremy. Nils, go ahead.
I've got two questions that are less technical, or maybe they are, but they revolve around first of all, adoption in terms of, so you have those certificates, and the good data is on chain, right? But how can you ensure that the people who actually have to verify those credentials, so if, I have this certificate, now I go to an employer and say like, hey, these are my credentials. How can we make it easy for them to actually verify that this is not the fake, right? Because I can go and mint an 18170 with a 71, make it all look cool, but the keys are what's actually making this whole thing work. So is there tooling available in OpenBadges already that is either easily adjustable to source data from a blockchain instead of some fixed file URLs? Or HTTP URLs, or will that have to be built as well? Because obviously, certifying is one thing, verifying, that's kind of the whole other thing that we haven't even talked about.
So for OpenBadges version 1, version 2, there is a blockchain-specific implementation available publicly, or like an implementation specification publicly. So what kind of steps do you need to take to implement OpenBadges v2 on the blockchain? But to be honest, I'm not 100% aware of any good tool suites with regard to OpenBadges when it comes to providing them on the blockchain.
Okay. And my second question, and that's more OpenBadges per se. Jeremy, go ahead. If you have something for that topic, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, so the verification type is important to look at and to see when you're implementing a solution. There'll be a section, like in our solution here, it was about the issuer, and it shows how do you verify. And that verification type is either hosted or signed. So sometimes it's about well, you may have minted your transaction, but if I'm out to verify as a third party, there would be instructions that says, like, here's the source folder where that information is being stored. And if I don't see your certificate that you minted in that folder, then I know that it's not real. The blockchain standard is about signed data, and it's looking at digital signatures, and it's being able to authenticate that that is the real digital signature from the issuer. And if you're looking for tooling, you might be thinking about like a check mark like Twitter has or something like that. And that's kind of the interesting side of it, is that if there's any type of tooling systems like this to make verification systems easier, it allows for blockchain-based like digital records to expand in adoption. Because right now, it just, yeah, as Sebastian is alluding to, it's not very streamlined to do those verification steps. And there's not an actual also to like standards that exist for how do you verify that this is the authentic record. And there may not be a standard. It could just be that there's just solutions, and then the framework is something that people need to agree upon, right? So the type of digital signature that you use, the types of data hashes that you use, etc.
You want to go with the send pool?
Thanks.
Well,
I'm ready. First off, thanks for the great presentation, Sebastian, and very elegant solution for the GDPR to do the hashing of names. Really like that. It brings privacy into it, so that's good. I was just wondering if you had any thoughts about how to handle updates to these certificates. If you go and have the course for a second time, how do you manage that? Or have you thought about anything around that?
Not at all, to be honest. So when you're considering a layer 2 solution, you could reuse something from what, for example, Decentralized Identity Foundation proposes, so-called side tree protocol, where you kind of manage the deltas and only write the proofs of those deltas on chain. This would accommodate for it. For that certain solution that we didn't consider it. So you could, of course, use a mechanism that references the transaction hash of one of the assertions and points to the old transaction when you're claiming to update it. But that's more like a layman's implementation, I would guess, or like a first approach to handle things like that. And also, question would be what's actually the use case of updating that certification data? I mean, only use case I have in mind would be a revocation, that it turns out that someone cheated during the exams and then his granted certificates should be revoked. That's probably something to keep in mind.
Yeah. For the certifications, yes. But in regard, if this is a exam for a regular course in a university, students can take the course again to get better grades, for example.
Yes.
Yeah.
You would just mint another result and then pick the newest one. But to be honest, didn't put too much thought in it. But there are a couple of options to implement those kind of things, I guess.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, it feels like for me, that was my next question was how to deal with like abuse and potentially revoking those. And I mean, obviously, depending on what you do from a policy perspective, you can always burn the token if the policy is under control of somebody else. the issuer. If the policy is open, that's tricky. The alternative is to just mint a new kind of follow-up, which kind of leads me into a general question I have, not for you, Sebastian, only, but one of the things that I'm trying to deal with, and I haven't seen a generic kind of approach to on Cardano, is follow up anything. So if I have, and I come from the perspective of process modeling, in which your processes change over time, and at some point the process is you do A, then you do B, and then you do C, and that's approved by all the parties that have to perform those functions. But then at some point it changes, and there's a new process. And I haven't come up with any better idea than what you just said, which is kind of referencing the old thing and say, this is the next iteration, this is version 2. Are there any standards out there that are trying to solve that problem in a way that you don't have burning as an impediment? Because if the policy is closed, you cannot, any token that represents anything can be burned at that point. So how can I make a follow-up? Because you can't forward reference. It's really hard to say on a token that I have now, the next version of this token will be this reference, because you don't have an asset, you may not even have a policy ready. So how can we do forward referencing or backward referencing in a standard way? And that's across any kind of standard. It's not even just for 721 or for 1870, but for any standard. How can I say, here's the next version of this thing, or this is the successor of this other thing that existed before?
Difficult question. So, I mean, friend of mine just reported back, he holds some, I don't know all this metadata stuff, but he holds some landmark token in a game, and the only, which is like an NFT, and they updated the standard because there was some issue in the library that they were using was Ethereum based, and the only solution they had that they needed to burn that token, and then he got a new one just to implement that update. For Cardano, you can pretty much do the same, but it's probably not a good solution. There is CIP68 with those 2 tokens that you're minting with CIP68, and you also do it in a smart contract way and not just based on metadata. So this could be a way to go. So the user token and the actual, or the use token and the actual NFT token. But I'm not aware of ongoing standardization activities with regards to concrete CIPs. Maybe Mel knows one, or Jeremy is aware of anyone, but I'm not.
No, not particularly. The only thing is that when you start doing something like this in transactions on Cardano, that if you start tracking updates to digital identities or updates to OpenBadges, then it becomes terribly expensive. So if you try and take the original model of like an access control system and apply it to blockchain, all the different events, like I have access to this military base, but I don't have access to this military base. Storing them on layer 1 in metadata becomes a huge data problem. It's the same with most digital identity systems. So usually what happens is that is taken away from layer 1. Does that make sense? So yeah, so I mean, there's always a balance between the economic cost of doing these things and you know, what is actually technically possible. You can always just reference a unique identity and a unique course identity and a unique certificate outside of that, point to that, and then as you follow the chain, you go, okay, well, this is the exact same reference, so this is the new certificate, or this is the revocation of that, or whatever. But economically speaking, doing that on, you know, in scale is not a great idea.
So the standard that we use that I also linked here, I'm not sure by a show of hands, like who actually reads through application standard documents. You know, might be a couple hands up, like, so we definitely did when looking at the OpenBadge from start to finish. And we had to, and we're thinking about, well, how we're going to bring this to Cardano. And a revocation list would be something that could be done like, with the issuer transaction. You can have a link to say, here's all the assets that are being revoked. You could also have a list of updated assets. And, that does work. When you have kind of like unit economics that makes sense to that. So if there is like a cash flow stream that gets attached to the issuance of a blockchain record, then that works there. The other thing to note on Cardano is that even if you close a policy, you can still overwrite the metadata of that asset, but explorers won't view that as the actual record, right? So what if we had a system on Cardano that showed like, if you wanted to upgrade assets in a closed policy, that it says like, okay, so instead of pointing to the minting transaction for the metadata, we will use a specific version which has been signed by the minting policy ID owner. But that's another, approach that could become standardized, and it could be applied then to any use case where we're looking for different versions of assets, but still have a way to prove its uniqueness, but also, verify that the right parties involved are doing that upgrade process, or else you just have some chaos. I see there's some messages. I don't know if they're talking about what I'm saying or if it's just something else.
Just wanted to clarify my obscure example that I gave with regards to burning that token, because I'm really not into those metaverse stuff. And with regards to updates, I guess in the end, it will be a layer 2 solution to go. When we talk to the guys from Flurry, that's a pretty nice way to do it, because they also implement a feature they call time travel. So when you have a certain asset that, and they're leveraging content addressable storage, so they deal about databases or relations, which is like a database table, they call it. You can make updates, and there is a front end on top of all those changes that happen, like changes, deletions, revocations, updates, which is the same as changes. And then to the front end, they only deliver whether the latest point in time, like the tip representation of the data, or you can move back in the time to a certain revision or point in time, and then you get this older data thing. And that's also the way how they implement GDPR compliance. So they are not really deleting the data, which is possible, which would be possible on layer 2, but usually they don't delete the data. They just place some record that marks the data as deleted, which is back from my time in banking. The same approach that regulated entities need to implement when it comes to processing GDPR related requests, so deletion requests. They are not really allowed to delete the actual data entry, but then at the same time, they must kind of lock that entry for any further processing by any downstream data processing process stuff. So I guess layer 2 would be the way to go in the end.
Thank you, Sebastian. Well, we've been going for about an hour, folks. I'd like to wrap this up. If we have any last thoughts or questions to add to this, raise your hand or get it out. No?
Yeah, there's one thing I would like to add. So I think there was a couple of questions related to how to popularize this, or how to talk about, or how to get other people that want to build involved in this. And to be honest, I personally think standards link all of us. They link what the explorers like Pool.pm can present, Cardano Scan, etc. We need the standards, but also, like, from our perspective, standards need to organically grow based on what the needs of people are. You know, I mean, we're not just going to take a standard from non-blockchain world and dump it on, and it won't apply directly. It has to grow as all of these companies develop their own implementations, and some of them will go off with different standards, and that's perfectly fine. Like Sebastian said, there's a, you know, a standard with American universities, then there's the OpenBadges standard. One might benefit some type of business on Cardano, another, but they have standards. So I think, you know, for us, a strong focus is on standards, but also understanding that we can't just set a standard because it might not apply to your businesses. It might not, you know, it has to come through that development process, through that need from those people. That's, you know, just my perspective on the evolution of standards and how they fit in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
I mean,
But is there, sorry, go ahead, Jeremy.
Cardano was designed for a transaction to have 16,000 bytes. So I like to try to find ways to use those bytes of data. And layer 2, I think, is great and all, but you know, there's tons of use cases where many people may value layer 1 because it's much more simple to scale. You know, not everybody can just tap into a layer 2 chain. That does become a much more commercial, you know, venture for most people. So I personally like looking at what we can do with Cardano as a layer 1, how we can add a lot more rich content, how we can do these combinations like we're showing here, how to add, you know, verification data, and because there's just so many like existing use cases where that brings out a much more robust, high quality application. But I think those same people then are the talents that will be able to really take advantage of layer 2 capabilities and, you know, find something that has like a larger product market fit. Back to you, Peter.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, looking to continue hosting these roundtables to work on discussions towards these types of ends, because yeah, looking to create efficiency and help conversation flow. And yeah, thank you all for coming today. It's been a good conversation. I've enjoyed listening, and think there are opportunities embodied in more conversations further down the road towards similar ends for all parties in this awesome ecosystem. And yeah, thank you, Sebastian, for your presentation. Thank you, Jeremy, for coming, and Mel, it's good to meet you. Your background changed mid-call. I'm a little confused. I think that's awesome. I like changing my background to switch stuff
It's
up.
dark. It's dark here. It's nighttime. So I'm in Ireland, and it gets dark very early. So that's it.
Awesome. Well, it's nice to meet you all. Thank you for coming. This is the end of the recording in NFT Guild Roundtable 10. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.